The screech of tires against asphalt was the last sound Marcus Whitfield heard before his world went black. The CEO of Whitfield Industries, worth over $2 billion, had been driving home from a late board meeting when a truck ran a red light and slammed into his Mercedes. Metal twisted, glass shattered, and Marcus's carefully controlled life spun into chaos. When he finally opened his eyes 3 days later, the first thing he saw was an angel. At least that's what he thought she was. Soft brown eyes gazed down at him with genuine concern, framed by a face so kind and beautiful it made his chest ache. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore pale blue scrubs that somehow made her look even more ethereal. "Mr. Whitfield? Can you hear me?" Her voice was gentle, like a melody he'd been searching for his entire life. "You're in the hospital. You've been in an accident, but you're safe now." Marcus tried to speak, but his throat was dry and raw. She immediately reached for a cup of water, carefully helping him take small sips. Her touch was tender, careful, as if he were something precious that might break. "I'm Elena," she said softly. "I'll be taking care of you during your recovery. Don't try to talk too much yet. You have 3 broken ribs, a fractured leg, and a severe concussion, but you're lucky to be alive." Over the following days, Marcus found himself watching Elena constantly. She was different from anyone he'd ever known. In his world of corporate sharks and social climbers, everyone wanted something from him. But Elena seemed to want nothing except to see him heal. She would read to him when the pain was too intense for him to sleep, her voice soothing away the worst of his discomfort. She never asked about his money or his company. She talked about simple things: the weather, the flowers blooming outside his window, the stray cat that visited the hospital courtyard. "You're not like the other nurses," Marcus observed one afternoon, his voice still rough from the breathing tube they'd recently removed. "They're professional, efficient. But you actually care." Elena's cheeks flushed pink and she looked away. "Everyone deserves compassion, Mr. Whitfield, especially when they're hurting." "Call me Marcus," he insisted, "and tell me about yourself. Where did you train? How long have you been a nurse?" He noticed how she hesitated, how her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted his IV. I trained locally, and I haven't been doing this very long. You're teaching me to be better at it." There was something in her eyes, a shadow, a secret, but Marcus was too captivated to question it deeply. As the days turned into weeks, he found himself falling in love with her. It was absurd, he knew. He was Marcus Whitfield, a man who'd dated supermodels and celebrities, a man who'd sworn off love after his ex-wife had only wanted his bank account. Yet here he was, his heart racing every time Elena walked into the room. What he didn't know was that Elena Rodriguez was fighting her own battle. Every time she looked at him, she saw the man her brother blamed for destroying their family. Her brother, Raphael, had been the driver of that truck, but Raphael swore it wasn't his fault. He claimed Marcus had been speeding, reckless, and that Marcus's lawyers had paid off witnesses to protect his reputation. Raphael was now in jail, facing vehicular assault charges, and their elderly mother was losing their family home to pay for legal fees. Elena had come to the hospital with a mission: to get close to Marcus Whitfield, to find evidence of his wrongdoing, to make him pay for what he'd done to her family. She'd stolen a friend's hospital credentials and forged the necessary paperwork to get assigned to his private room. It was supposed to be simple: gain his trust, search his belongings for anything incriminating, destroy him the way he destroyed Raphael. But nothing was simple anymore. Because somewhere between reading him poetry in the quiet hours of the night and holding his hand through the pain, somewhere between his terrible jokes and the way he looked at her like she was the only real thing in his artificial world, Elena had made a catastrophic mistake. She'd fallen in love with him too. Now, as she stood in his hospital room, watching him sleep peacefully for the first time since the accident, Elena felt tears stream down her face. What had she done? Her brother was counting on her. Her mother was depending on her. But her heart was betraying them all for the man who had supposedly ruined their lives. The door opened behind her and Elena quickly wiped her tears. Marcus's real doctor stepped in and Elena's blood ran cold. She wasn't supposed to be on duty tonight. If anyone checked the schedule, if anyone questioned her credentials, "Nurse Rodriguez?" The doctor said, his brow furrowed. "I need to speak with you now." Elena's heart hammered against her ribs as she followed Dr. Harrison into the hallway. The fluorescent light seemed impossibly bright, exposing every lie she'd been living for the past 3 weeks. She clasped her hands together to stop them from shaking, her mind racing through possible escape routes and explanations. "I've been reviewing Mr. Whitfield's care," Dr. Harrison began, his expression serious. Elena braced herself for exposure, for security guards, for the police. But instead he smiled. "I wanted to personally commend you. His recovery has been remarkable, and his charts show that you've been going above and beyond. Staying past your shifts, providing emotional support. This is exactly the kind of holistic care we strive for." "Well done." Elena felt relief flood through her, immediately followed by crushing guilt. "Thank you, Dr. Harrison. I want to make sure he heals properly. It shows. In fact, I'm recommending you for our Employee Excellence Program." He handed her a folder. "There's some paperwork to fill out. We'll need copies of your nursing credentials and transcripts for the award committee." The relief evaporated. Of course, I'll get those to you." As Dr. Harrison walked away, Elena leaned against the wall, fighting the urge to vomit. This was spiraling out of control. She needed to end this. Either find what she came for or disappear before everything exploded. But the thought of leaving Marcus made her chest constrict with pain. She returned to his room to find him awake, his gray eyes tracking her movement with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Elena," he said softly. "Come here." She approached his bed and he reached for her hand. His grip was stronger now, his body healing with each passing day. "I need to tell you something. I've been thinking about this for days and I can't keep it in anymore. Marcus, you should rest. I'm falling in love with you." The words hung in the air between them, raw and honest. "I know it's crazy. I know you probably think I'm just some rich guy who gets confused between gratitude and real emotion. But this is different. You're different. When I'm with you, I'm not Marcus Whitfield, CEO. I'm just me, the man I forgot I could be." Elena felt tears burning her eyes. "Marcus, you don't know me." "Not really." "Then let me know you." He pulled her closer and she found herself sitting on the edge of his bed. "Tell me everything. Your dreams, your fears, your past. I want to know every piece of you." This was her moment. She should tell him the truth. But instead she heard herself say, "I'm not who you think I am." "What do you mean?" Before she could answer, the door burst open. A tall, elegant woman in a designer suit strode in, her heels clicking authoritatively against the linoleum. Her blonde hair was styled perfectly, her makeup flawless, her expression cold. "Marcus, darling," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I came as soon as I heard about your accident. I've been so worried." Marcus's expression hardened. "Victoria, what are you doing here?" Elena tried to pull her hand away, but Marcus held on tighter. Victoria's eyes narrowed as she noticed their joined hands, her gaze raking over Elena with obvious disdain. "Is this your nurse? How quaint." Victoria's smile was sharp as a knife. "Marcus, we need to talk. Privately. About the Henderson merger and your company's future. Surely you don't want to discuss business in front of the help." "Elena is not the help," Marcus said firmly. "And whatever you have to say, you can say it in front of her." Victoria's mask slipped for a moment, revealing pure venom. "Fine, I'll be direct. Your board is concerned about your absence. Your competitors are circling. And I've been holding everything together. You owe me, Marcus. We had an agreement. When your company merged with my father's holdings, we would be partners. In business and in life. That agreement ended when you slept with my business partner," Marcus said coldly. "We're divorced, Victoria. You have no claim on me or my company." "Perhaps not legally," Victoria said, her eyes glittering dangerously. "But I wonder what the board would think if they knew their fearless leader was playing house with some nobody nurse. Or what the shareholders would say if certain information about the accident became public." Elena felt ice settle in her stomach. "What information?" Victoria smiled triumphantly. "Oh, did Marcus not tell you? The accident wasn't entirely the other driver's fault. Marcus was on the phone, conducting business while driving. Distracted. The police report conveniently left that out thanks to his very expensive lawyers. But I have proof. Phone records. Text messages. Enough to destroy him? You're lying," Elena whispered, but she saw the truth in Marcus's pained expression. "Marcus?" Elena turned to him, her voice breaking. "Tell me she's lying." Marcus closed his eyes. "I was on a business call. But the other driver ran a red light, that's a fact. I was distracted, yes, but I wasn't the one who caused—" "You were both at fault," Elena said, her mind reeling. Her brother had been telling the truth, at least partially. But so had Marcus. The reality was more complicated than either of them had admitted. My God. Elena, let me explain. But she was already backing away, her hand slipping from his. I need air. She fled the room, Victoria's satisfied laughter following her down the corridor. Elena ran to the nearest stairwell and collapsed on the steps, her body shaking with sobs. Everything was falling apart. Marcus wasn't the villain Raphael had painted him to be, but he wasn't innocent either. And she was the worst of all, lying to everyone while judging them for their own deceptions. Her phone buzzed. A text from Raphael. Did you find anything yet? Mom's about to lose the house. We're running out of time. Elena stared at the message, then at her stolen hospital badge, then back toward Marcus's room. She was standing at a crossroads and every path led to heartbreak. What she didn't know was that Marcus had struggled out of bed, ignoring his doctor's orders, and was searching the hospital for her. Or that Victoria was already making calls to Marcus's board members, planting seeds of doubt about his competence and mental state. Or that hospital security had finally noticed the discrepancies in Elena's credentials and were reviewing surveillance footage at that very moment. The truth was coming for all of them, and there would be no escaping it. Elena sat in the hospital chapel, a small room that smelled of old wood and candle wax. She'd been there for over an hour, phone in hand, unable to decide what to do. The rational part of her mind screamed that she should run, disappear before security discovered her deception, before Marcus learned who she really was. But her heart refused to move. I thought I might find you here. She looked up to see Marcus standing in the doorway, leaning heavily on a crutch. He was dressed in a hospital gown and sweatpants, his face pale with exertion. He shouldn't have been out of bed. Marcus, you need to rest. I need to talk to you. He hobbled to the pew beside her and sat down with a grimace of pain. About Victoria. About the accident. About everything. You don't owe me any explanations, Elena said quietly. I'm just your nurse. Stop it. His voice was sharp, cutting through her pretense. You're not just anything. And we both know this, whatever this is between us, it's real. Elena felt tears threatening again. If only he knew how complicated real actually was. The accident, Marcus began, staring at his hands. I was on a business call. A multi-million-dollar deal that I'd been working on for months. I was distracted and I hate myself for it. But the other driver, he ran a red light, Elena. He was going at least 50 in a 35 zone. Multiple witnesses confirmed it. But your lawyers made sure your distraction wasn't in the official report, Elena said. Yes, Marcus admitted, and I'm not proud of it. But the driver's attorney was trying to claim I was entirely at fault, that I'd run the light, that I'd been reckless. It wasn't true, so my lawyers fought back, maybe too hard. Maybe they buried things that should have been acknowledged. But I wasn't the villain in this, Elena. I was just flawed, human. Elena wanted to hate him. It would make everything so much simpler. But she could hear the genuine remorse in his voice, see the guilt in his eyes. This wasn't a man who'd carelessly destroyed her family. This was a complicated situation where everyone bore some responsibility. Why does Victoria have proof of your phone call? Elena asked. Marcus's jaw tightened. Because she's been looking for leverage against me since our divorce. She planted someone in my legal team, I'm certain of it. She's been gathering information, waiting for the right moment to use it. She wants me to take her back, to merge our companies, to give her the power she craves. Will you? Never. His answer was immediate and fierce. I would rather lose everything than spend another moment with that woman. But, he hesitated, his voice dropping. But she could destroy me. If she releases those phone records, the other driver's lawyers will reopen the case. I could face criminal charges. My company's stock will tank. Everything I've built could disappear. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of impossible choices pressing down on both of them. Elena, Marcus said finally, turning to face her fully. Before Victoria interrupted, you were about to tell me something. You said you're not who I think you are. What did you mean? This was it, the moment of truth. Elena opened her mouth, but before she could speak, the chapel door burst open. 2 security guards stood there, and behind them Elena could see Dr. Harrison, his earlier kindness replaced by cold anger. Elena Rodriguez, one of the guards said. We need you to come with us now. Marcus struggled to his feet. What's going on? What's this about? Mr. Whitfield, Dr. Harrison said stiffly. I'm afraid your nurse has been operating under false credentials. She's not licensed, not trained, and not authorized to provide medical care. We're calling the police." Elena watched Marcus's face, saw the confusion, then the dawning realization, and finally the betrayal. It was like watching him die all over again. "Marcus, please," she started, but he held up his hand. "Who are you?" His voice was barely a whisper. "Really, who are you?" "My name is Elena Rodriguez," she said, her voice breaking. "And the man who hit you, the driver of that truck, is my brother, Raphael." The color drained from Marcus's face. The security guards moved forward, but Marcus stopped them with a gesture. "Everyone out. I want to speak with her alone." "Sir, we really should. Out. Now." They retreated, though Elena could see them hovering just outside the door. Marcus stared at her as if she were a stranger, as if she were a monster. "You've been lying to me this entire time," he said flatly. "Playing nurse? Getting close to me? Why, revenge? Information? Were you planning to hurt me?" "At first, yes," Elena admitted, tears streaming down her face. "Raphael said you were responsible for everything. His arrest, my mother losing our home, our family falling apart. He said you'd paid off witnesses, that you'd lied about what happened. I wanted to find proof. I wanted to make you pay, and—" Marcus's voice was like ice. "Did you find what you were looking for?" "No, because I fell in love with you." The words burst out of her, desperate and true. "I didn't mean to. I tried not to. But you're not the monster Raphael described. You're good and kind and real, and everything I've felt with you, it's been real too. All of it." "How can I believe anything you say?" Marcus asked, his voice cracking. "For weeks you've been lying to me, manipulating me. Was any of it true? The poetry readings? The conversations? The way you looked at me?" "All of it was true," Elena sobbed. "I may have come here with lies, but I stayed because of the truth. Because of how you made me feel. Because you're the first person who ever saw me, really saw me. Not just as someone's sister or daughter, but as Elena." Marcus closed his eyes, and Elena could see him warring with himself. When he opened them again, she saw a man torn between love and betrayal, between forgiveness and self-preservation. "I need you to leave," he said finally, "right now. And I don't ever want to see you again. Marcus, please, get out." His shout echoed in the small chapel, and Elena flinched as if he'd struck her. "You used me. You lied to me. And worst of all, you made me believe—" His voice broke. "You made me believe that someone could actually love me for who I am. But it was all just part of your revenge scheme." Elena stood on shaking legs. "I do love you. That's the one thing that's completely, absolutely true. Love doesn't lie," Marcus said coldly. "Love doesn't deceive. Whatever you felt, it wasn't love. It was just guilt masquerading as something better. Now go, before I have you arrested for fraud, identity theft, and practicing medicine without a license." Elena stumbled toward the door, but she turned back one last time. "The accident wasn't entirely your fault, but it wasn't entirely Raphael's either. You were both responsible, but your lawyers made sure only he paid the price. That's not justice, Marcus. That's just power protecting power." She didn't wait for his response. She fled past the security guards, past the curious nurses and doctors, past the life she'd built on lies and lost to truth. Behind her, she heard a crash, Marcus throwing something or perhaps collapsing, and every instinct screamed at her to go back. But she kept running. She ran until she reached her tiny apartment where Raphael was waiting, his face lighting up with hope. "Did you get it?" he asked eagerly. "Did you find proof we can use?" Elena looked at her brother, really looked at him, and for the first time she saw the selfishness in his eyes. He didn't want justice. He wanted revenge. He wanted someone else to blame for his mistakes. "You lied to me," she said quietly. "You did run that red light. You were speeding. Marcus was distracted, yes, but you were reckless." Raphael's face hardened. "He has fancy lawyers. I had a public defender. Of course they made it seem like I was the only one at fault. Because you were mostly at fault." Elena's voice rose. "And instead of accepting responsibility, you sent your sister to destroy an innocent man's life. He's a billionaire. He'll be fine. But what about us? What about Mom? What about our family? What about right and wrong?" Elena shot back. "I fell in love with him, Raphael. And he fell in love with me. And I destroyed it all because you couldn't accept the consequences of your own actions." She grabbed a bag and started throwing clothes into it, her movements jerky with anger and grief. Where are you going? Raphael demanded. Away from here. Away from you. Away from all these lies. She zipped the bag and headed for the door. Elena, if you leave now, Mom loses the house. We lose everything. Elena paused, her hand on the doorknob. Then I guess you should have thought about that before you ran a red light. She walked out, leaving her brother standing alone in the apartment, finally facing the truth of what he'd done. What she didn't know was that Marcus was at that moment receiving a visit from Victoria, who was presenting her ultimatum with a satisfied smile, or that Marcus's head of security had begun investigating Elena's background and was discovering things even she didn't know about her brother's past, or that the truth, the full, complicated truth, was about to surface in ways no one could have predicted. Marcus stared at the ceiling of his hospital room, the events of the past hours replaying in his mind like a nightmare he couldn't escape. Elena's face, her tears, her confession, her desperate claim of love haunted him. Part of him wanted to believe her. Part of him wanted to storm out of this hospital, find her and forgive everything. But the rational part, the part that had been betrayed before, built walls of ice around his heart. A knock at the door interrupted his spiral. His head of security, James Chen, entered with a thick manila folder. Mr. Whitfield, we need to talk about Elena Rodriguez, James said, pulling up a chair. I don't want to hear her name, Marcus said flatly. You need to hear this. James opened the folder. I've been investigating her background since security flagged her credentials. It's complicated. Against his better judgment, Marcus sat up. Tell me. Rafael Rodriguez, her brother, has a history of reckless driving. 3 prior incidents, all settled out of court with the victims. He was driving without insurance the night of your accident, and his blood alcohol level was .06, below the legal limit but still impaired. The police report buried that detail. Marcus's breath caught. Why would they do that? Because Raphael's lawyer argued that your distraction was the primary cause. With your lawyers fighting back so hard, the prosecution focused entirely on the traffic violation, rather than the impairment. It kept their case simple. So Raphael was drunk, Marcus said slowly, and Elena didn't know. There's more. Elena Rodriguez isn't just a concerned sister. She dropped out of pre-med 3 years ago when her father died of a heart attack. She'd been working 3 jobs to put herself through school and support her family. When Raphael got arrested, she sold everything she had to help with his legal fees. Her mother's home isn't being foreclosed because of the legal bills. It's being foreclosed because Elena emptied her own savings and maxed out credit cards to save it. And now she can't make the payments. Marcus felt something crack in his chest. She sacrificed everything for her family. And her brother has been manipulating her the entire time, James continued. I interviewed some of Raphael's former friends. He has a pattern, making reckless choices and then blaming others. His ex-girlfriend, his former employer, now you. He told Elena a version of events that cast him as the victim and you as the villain, because he needed her to believe him. To save him. She came here to destroy me for a brother who's been lying to her, Marcus whispered. But she didn't destroy you, James pointed out. She had access to everything. Your medical records, your personal belongings, your private conversations. She could have stolen documents, planted evidence, done real damage. But she didn't. She just took care of you. Marcus rubbed his face, exhaustion and confusion warring inside him. It doesn't change the fact that she lied. That everything between us was built on deception. Was it? James asked quietly. Or did something real grow out of complicated circumstances? You're the one who always told me that people aren't defined by their worst decisions but by what they do after. What did Elena do when she realized the truth? Marcus didn't answer. He was replaying every moment with Elena, the genuine care in her eyes, the way she'd stayed past her shifts, the poetry she'd read when he couldn't sleep, the tears she'd shed when she thought he wasn't watching. That hadn't been manipulation. That had been real. His phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. Made my decision yet? I can have those phone records to the press by morning. Marcus felt rage boil up inside him. Victoria represented everything he despised. The use of power without conscience, the manipulation of others for personal gain. Elena had lied, yes, but she'd done it out of love for her family, out of a desire to protect those she cared about. Victoria was doing it purely for herself. James, Marcus said suddenly, I need you to look into Victoria's activities. Her finances, her communications, everything. Already on it, sir. I suspected she might make a move. James pulled out another folder, this one even thicker. Victoria has been embezzling from her father's company, the one that merged with yours. She's been cooking the books for years. I have documentation of shell companies, offshore accounts, fraudulent contracts. If this goes public, she doesn't just lose leverage over you, she goes to prison. A cold smile crossed Marcus's face. She threatened the wrong person. What do you want me to do? Arrange a meeting tonight and get our lawyers, all of them. It's time Victoria learned that blackmail is a game two can play. While Marcus was preparing for war, Elena sat on a bench in a small park, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Her phone had 17 missed calls from Raphael and 3 voicemails she hadn't listened to. She had $37 in her bank account, no job prospects, and nowhere to go. She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt oddly free. For years, she'd been carrying the weight of everyone else's expectations and needs. Her father's medical bills, her mother's grief, Raphael's mistakes. She'd sacrificed her dreams, her education, her own happiness to keep everyone else afloat. And where had it gotten her? She'd betrayed the only man who'd ever made her feel seen and valued for herself. Elena Rodriguez. She looked up to see a well-dressed woman in her 50s with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a neat bun. I'm Margaret Whitfield, Marcus's mother, the woman said. May I sit? Elena's heart lurched. Yes, of course. Margaret sat down gracefully, studying Elena with an intensity that reminded her of Marcus. My son is miserable. He's been shouting at nurses, refusing treatment, and generally making everyone's life difficult. This is not typical Marcus behavior. I'm sorry, Elena whispered. I never meant to hurt him. I know you didn't. Margaret's voice was surprisingly gentle. James Chen, Marcus's head of security, filled me in on everything. I wanted to meet the woman who finally broke through my son's walls. I broke his heart, Elena said bitterly. That's not something to be proud of. You made him feel something real, Margaret corrected. For the first time since his divorce, he allowed himself to be vulnerable. Yes, you lied, but you also showed him more genuine care than anyone has in years. Tell me, Elena, do you love my son? Yes. The answer was immediate, painful. More than anything. But he'll never forgive me, and I don't blame him. I came to his hospital room planning to use him, to hurt him. The fact that I fell in love with him instead doesn't erase what I did. Margaret was quiet for a moment, watching the sunset. When Marcus's father died, I was angry at the world. He'd been everything to me, and I blamed everyone for his death. The doctors who couldn't save him, the company that had stressed him, even Marcus for not being there at the end. I said terrible things. I pushed my son away when he needed me most. What changed? Elena asked. Marcus forgave me. He sat me down and said, Mom, people make mistakes when they're hurting. It doesn't mean they love us less. It just means they're human. He gave me grace when I didn't deserve it, and it saved our relationship. Saved me. Margaret turned to Elena. My son is currently planning to destroy his ex-wife with the same ruthlessness he uses in business. But that's not who he really is. He's hurting and he's lashing out. He needs someone to remind him who he really is. He doesn't want to see me, Elena said. He doesn't know what he wants, Margaret countered, which is why you need to fight for him. If you truly love my son, you don't give up just because things are difficult. You prove that your love is stronger than your mistakes. Before Elena could respond, her phone rang. Raphael's name flashed on the screen. She declined the call, but Margaret had seen it. Your brother? Margaret asked. Elena nodded. He's angry that I won't help him anymore, that I chose honesty over family loyalty. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do for family is let them face the consequences of their actions, Margaret said wisely. She stood up and handed Elena a business card. This is the name of my personal attorney. She handles pro bono cases for people who deserve a second chance. She can help you sort out your financial situation, get your brother proper representation that isn't based on lies, and maybe help your mother keep her home through legal means. Why would you help me? Elena asked, tears forming. After what I did to your son. Because you made my son laugh again. You made him hope again. And because I believe people deserve the same grace Marcus once gave me. Margaret smiled. Besides, I've always wanted a daughter-in-law with fire in her spirit. You'll need it to handle a Whitfield man. As Margaret walked away, Elena stared at the business card in her hand. She thought about Marcus. about his anger and pain, about the love she'd seen in his eyes before betrayal had extinguished it. Margaret was right, she couldn't give up. Not when something real was worth fighting for. She pulled out her phone and made a call. Not to Raphael, but to Marcus's hospital room. A nurse answered. ICU, how can I help you? I need to speak with Marcus Whitfield. It's urgent. I'm sorry, Mr. Whitfield has left strict instructions not to be disturbed. He's in a meeting with his legal team and tell him Elena Rodriguez needs 5 minutes. Tell him I have information about the accident that changes everything. Tell him, she took a breath. Tell him the truth is more complicated than either of us knew, and if he wants justice instead of revenge, he'll hear me out. There was a long pause. Then, hold please. Elena waited, her heart pounding. She was either about to get a second chance or face final rejection. But at least she would have tried. At least she would have fought for something real. The line clicked. You have 5 minutes. Marcus's voice was cold, guarded. Make them count. Marcus sat in the hospital's conference room, surrounded by lawyers and documents that could destroy Victoria. But as he listened to Elena's voice on the speakerphone, everything else faded into background noise. I know you have no reason to believe me. Elena began, her voice shaking, but determined. But your head of security, James, he found things about Raphael that I never knew. Things that change everything about that night. I'm listening, Marcus said tersely, even as his heart ached at the sound of her voice. Elena laid it all out. Raphael's history of reckless driving, the buried evidence of impairment, the pattern of manipulation and blame. With each revelation, Marcus watched his lawyers exchange significant glances. This was ammunition they could use. Raphael lied to me, Elena continued, her voice breaking. He made me believe you were a monster who destroyed our family through privilege and power. And I was so desperate to help him, so drowning in trying to save everyone, that I believed him without question. I came to your hospital room to find evidence against you, Marcus. But instead I found the truth about you, about Raphael, and about myself. What truth? Marcus asked quietly, leaning forward despite himself. That I'd been living my life for everyone else's needs and mistakes. That I'd given up my dreams, my education, my own happiness to fix problems that weren't mine to fix. And that somewhere in those weeks of caring for you, I found myself again. The woman I was supposed to be before I lost her to everyone else's expectations. Marcus closed his eyes, remembering Elena reading poetry to him, laughing at his terrible jokes, holding his hand through the pain. If any of what you felt was real, he said slowly, why didn't you tell me the truth sooner? Because I was a coward, Elena admitted. Because I knew the truth would destroy what we had and I wasn't ready to lose you. Every day I told myself I'd confess tomorrow, and every day tomorrow seemed too soon. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Marcus. I'm just asking you to know that when I said I loved you, I meant it. That was the one truth in all my lies. Before Marcus could respond, Victoria burst into the conference room, her face flushed with anger. What is this? Some kind of ambush? You can't just summon me. Sit down, Victoria, Marcus said coldly, gesturing to his lawyers. Or would you prefer to have this conversation in front of the police? Victoria paled as one of the lawyers slid a folder across the table. This contains documentation of embezzlement, fraud, and corporate theft spanning 5 years. You've been stealing from your father's company, and by extension, from the merged holdings that include Whitfield Industries. You can't prove. We can prove everything, another lawyer interrupted. Shell companies in the Cayman Islands, falsified contracts, kickbacks from vendors, it's all here. You threatened Mr. Whitfield with blackmail, but you're the one facing federal charges. Victoria's mask of composure finally cracked. Marcus, please. We can work something out. You need me. I don't need you. I never did. Marcus stood, his legs still weak but his resolve strong. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to sign over every share you hold in the company. You're going to make full restitution for what you've stolen. And in exchange, we won't press criminal charges. That's everything I have, Victoria whispered. You should have thought of that before you tried to destroy me, Marcus said. You have 24 hours to decide. After that, we go to the police and the SEC. Your choice. Victoria looked around the room, seeing no sympathy anywhere. She signed the documents with shaking hands and fled, her designer heels clicking rapidly down the hallway. The door closed behind her, and Marcus felt a weight lift from his shoulders. But it was quickly replaced by a different kind of heaviness. Elena, he said into the phone, suddenly remembering she'd been listening to everything. "Are you still there?" "I'm here," she said softly. That was intense. "No more intense than learning the woman I love isn't who I thought she was," Marcus replied. He waved his lawyers out of the room, needing privacy. When they were alone, he continued, "Elena, I don't know how to do this. Part of me wants to forget everything and just be with you. But part of me is terrified of being fooled again, of trusting someone who's already proven they can lie to me so completely." "I understand," Elena said, and he could hear tears in her voice. "And I'm not asking you to trust me right now. I'm just asking for a chance to earn that trust back, however long it takes." Marcus sat in silence, his mind and heart at war. Everything logical told him to walk away, to protect himself from more pain. But his heart, his damn stubborn heart, kept remembering the way Elena had cared for him. Not as Marcus Whitfield, billionaire CEO, but as Marcus, just a man recovering from an accident, needing comfort and connection. "Where are you right now?" he asked finally. "Cedar Hill Park, by the fountain." "Stay there. I'm coming to you." "Marcus, you can barely walk." "I said I'm coming." He hung up and called for James. "I need a car. Now." 20 minutes later, Marcus arrived at the park, leaning heavily on his crutch. The sun had fully set and Elena was illuminated by the soft glow of streetlights, sitting on the same bench where his mother had found her. She looked up as he approached, her eyes red from crying, her face vulnerable in a way that made his chest ache. They stared at each other for a long moment, years of hurt and hope hanging between them. "I talked to my mother," Marcus said finally. "She seems to think you're worth fighting for." "Your mother is a wise woman," Elena said, managing a small smile. "She also thinks I'm an idiot if I let you go." Marcus sat down beside her, grimacing at the pain in his leg. "But she's not the one who got lied to. She's not the one whose trust was broken." "No," Elena agreed quietly, "but she is someone who made mistakes while hurting, and was given grace by someone who loved her anyway. She told me about your father, about how you forgave her when she pushed you away." Marcus looked at the fountain, watching water cascade in endless patterns. "My father taught me that people are complicated, that someone can make terrible choices and still be worthy of love, that redemption is always possible if someone truly wants to change." He turned to Elena. "Do you want to change?" "I already have," Elena said firmly. "I told Raphael I won't cover for him anymore, that he needs to take responsibility for his actions. I contacted your head of security and gave him all the information I had about the accident, even though it might hurt my brother's case. And I called the hospital and confessed to using false credentials. They're deciding whether to press charges." Marcus felt something shift in his chest. "You're willing to face legal consequences?" "I committed fraud. I deserve whatever punishment comes." Elena met his eyes. "But more than that, I need to stop protecting people from the natural consequences of their actions, including myself. I need to live authentically even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. You taught me that, Marcus. You taught me what it means to live with integrity." "I failed at that integrity," Marcus admitted. "I let my lawyers bury evidence that could have shared the blame with your brother more fairly. I used my power to protect myself without thinking about how it affected others. Then we're both flawed," Elena said. "Both human. Both trying to do better." Marcus reached out and took her hand, feeling the familiar warmth of her touch. "I want to believe in us, Elena. I want to believe that something real can grow from such complicated beginnings. But I'm scared. So am I," Elena whispered. "I'm terrified that you'll never fully trust me again, that every time I'm late or forget to mention something you'll wonder if I'm lying, that the shadow of my deception will haunt us forever." "It might," Marcus said honestly. "Trust is fragile. Once broken, it takes time and effort to rebuild. There will be days when I doubt, days when the hurt resurfaces. Are you prepared for that?" "Yes," Elena's answer was immediate. "Because I'd rather spend months or years earning back your trust than spend a lifetime knowing I gave up on something real. I love you, Marcus. Not Marcus Whitfield, the billionaire. Not the CEO or the public figure. I love the man who makes terrible jokes to cope with pain, who cries when he thinks no one is watching, who treats everyone from janitors to board members with the same respect. That's the man I fell in love with, and that's the man I want to fight for." Marcus felt his walls crumbling, his heart opening despite his fear. "I love you too. Even though you lied to me, even though trusting you is terrifying, even though this is possibly the most complicated relationship I could have chosen, I love you." He pulled her close, and she buried her face in his chest, her tears soaking his shirt. They sat like that for a long time, holding each other while the fountain played its endless song and the world continued around them. "So where do we go from here?" Elena asked finally. Marcus pulled back to look at her face. "We start with honesty. Complete, brutal, uncomfortable honesty. No more secrets, no more hidden truths. If we're going to make this work, we need transparency even when it's difficult." "Agreed," Elena said. "Second, we take it slow. We don't rush into anything. We give trust time to rebuild naturally, without forcing it." "That makes sense." "Third," Marcus said, a small smile forming, "you let me help you with your situation. Not because you owe me anything, but because that's what people who love each other do. They help each other through difficult times." "Marcus, I can't accept your money." "I'm not offering money," he interrupted. "I'm offering resources. My lawyers can help negotiate your mother's mortgage, find solutions that don't involve me writing a check. My connections can help you get back into medical school if that's what you want. And regarding your brother, I'm willing to talk to the prosecutor about a plea deal that acknowledges both our roles in the accident. Not because he deserves it, but because that's what justice actually looks like." Elena stared at him, fresh tears streaming down her face. "Why? After everything I did, why would you do this?" "Because you were right," Marcus said simply. "What happened that night wasn't entirely Raphael's fault or entirely mine. It was a convergence of poor choices by both of us. He should face consequences, yes, but fair ones. And your family shouldn't lose everything because of one mistake, especially when they have you trying so hard to save them." "I don't deserve you," Elena whispered. "Probably not," Marcus agreed with a slight smile. "But then again, I don't deserve you either. The woman who stayed past her shifts to read poetry to a stranger, who held my hand through pain without expecting anything in return, who sacrificed everything for her family, even when they didn't appreciate it." He cupped her face gently. "Maybe that's the point. Love isn't about deserving. It's about choosing each other despite all the reasons we shouldn't." He kissed her then, soft and tentative, a promise of possibilities. When they pulled apart, Elena was smiling through her tears. "So we're really doing this?" she asked. "Starting over? Building something real?" "We're doing this," Marcus confirmed. "Though I should warn you, dating a CEO is complicated. There will be media attention, board meetings, business trips, ex-wives causing drama. And dating a woman who's barely holding her life together is equally complicated," Elena countered. "There will be family drama, financial struggles, potential legal charges." "Sounds like we're perfectly matched in our chaos," Marcus said, laughing. Over the next several months, they kept their promises. Elena enrolled back in nursing school, a legitimate program this time with financial aid arranged through a scholarship Marcus's mother had quietly established. She attended therapy to work through her patterns of self-sacrifice and people-pleasing. She set boundaries with Raphael, who was eventually sentenced to probation and community service after Marcus agreed to a deal that acknowledged partial fault on both sides. Marcus underwent his own transformation. He created a foundation for victims of car accidents, funding support systems that helped families navigate the aftermath without destroying themselves financially. He became more present in his own life, delegating more at work and prioritizing relationships over transactions, and he learned slowly and painfully to trust again. Their relationship wasn't perfect. There were arguments about Elena's reluctance to accept help and Marcus's tendency to solve problems with money. There were moments when old wounds resurfaced, when trust wavered, when they both wondered if they were making a mistake. But they worked through it, with honesty and patience and a fierce commitment to choosing each other every single day. 2 years later, Marcus stood in a small chapel, the same chapel where Elena had confessed her deception, and watched her walk down the aisle. She wore a simple white dress and carried wildflowers, and she was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. "You sure about this?" he whispered as she reached him. "Last chance to run." "I've done my running," Elena whispered back, her eyes shining. "Now I choose to stay." The ceremony was small, just family and close friends. Raphael was there, sober and employed, still working on rebuilding his own life. Marcus's mother dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief, and when the minister pronounced them husband and wife, the entire chapel erupted in applause. At the reception, Marcus pulled Elena onto the dance floor, holding her close as they swayed to soft music. "Do you ever regret it?" Elena asked softly. "Everything we went through to get here?" Marcus considered the question seriously. "I regret the pain. I regret the lies and the broken trust. But I don't regret us," he kissed her forehead. "Because all that mess, all that complication, it taught us how to love each other properly. Not the fantasy version of love where everything is perfect, but the real version, where two imperfect people choose each other anyway." "I love the real version," Elena said, resting her head on his chest. "I love our story, even the messy parts. Especially the messy parts, because they made us who we are." As they danced, Marcus thought about the accident that had brought them together, the lies that had almost torn them apart, and the love that had survived despite everything. It wasn't a fairy tale romance. It was better. It was real, complicated, hard-won, and completely theirs. Sometimes the best love stories aren't about perfection. They're about two broken people who find each other in the wreckage and decide to rebuild together. They're about forgiveness, redemption, and the courage to trust again even after betrayal. They're about choosing love not because it's easy, but because it's worth fighting for. And as Marcus held his wife close, feeling her heartbeat against his chest, he knew with absolute certainty that every difficult moment had been worth it for this. For a love built on truth, earned through struggle, and destined to last a lifetime. The nurse who wasn't a nurse had saved his life twice, once from the accident and once from a future without love. And the millionaire who'd thought he'd lost everything had found something infinitely more valuable than any fortune. A partner who saw him for who he truly was and loved him anyway. Their story didn't end with happily ever after. It ended with happily ever fighting for each other, for honesty, for the messy, beautiful reality of a love that refused to give up, no matter what secrets tried to tear it apart.